The second a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spots a rider on open ground, that target is engaged long before reaching the trench line. That road is no longer a transport route. It is a kill zone, completely exposed, where every turn reveals their exact vector to our drone crews. This is why the latest Azov strike against Russian motorcycle units is so critical. This is not just combat footage. It exposes a systemic flaw in Moscow's strategy of deploying light, unarmored speed to penetrate Ukrainian defensive lines. But that same speed accelerates their exposure. A bike offers zero overhead armor, no side protection, and absolutely zero room for error when an FPV drone lock-on is achieved. Before we go deeper, please like, share, and subscribe to Military Force as we track the weapons and geopolitical shocks shaping today's world. Today, let's look at why Russia is sending motorcycles to the front, and why are Ukrainian drone teams turning this desperate tactic into a lethal trap. Russian commanders are pushing bikes forward because the frontline environment has become suicidal for heavy armor. Make no mistake, a bike is not a replacement for a heavily armored personnel carrier or infantry fighting vehicle. It means they are attempting to solve a critical tactical dilemma. Heavy armor carries more troops and firepower, but these columns are loud, easily detected, and impossible to conceal on modern battlefields. With Ukrainian drones monitoring the routes, a single landmine disabling the lead vehicle paralyzes the entire column instantly. If pre-sighted artillery opens up, an entire assault group is shattered before it even reaches the drop-off point. And if FPV drones are waiting, heavy armor becomes a slow-moving coffin, not a shield. That is why Russian commanders are opting for high-speed bikes. It allows a small assault fire team to sprint across exposed territory, navigate narrow terrain, and secure tree lines where heavy vehicles would be vaporized. They use them to probe weak points and draw defensive fire. They harass forward outposts or drop off infantry right at the trenches before Ukrainian heavy artillery can zero in on them. Under this doctrine, the bike is not a breakthrough asset. It is a high-risk gamble on raw velocity. This tactical shift is driven by the deadly synergy of minefields, artillery, aerial reconnaissance, and kamikaze drone swarms. Any vehicle moving on a predictable road is spotted instantly, tracked for miles, and destroyed the second it slows down to negotiate an obstacle. Even if the hull survives the initial impact, the surviving infantry are forced to dismount directly into a pre-sighted kill zone. That is the exact tactical nightmare Russian officers are desperate to bypass by deploying these lightweight, rapid assault squads. On the Kupiansk axis, Ukrainian combat reports state that Russian units integrated motorcycles into their assaults as the terrain dried up and summer foliage thickened. In these conditions, riding across open ground is far faster than moving on foot. To Russian staff officers, this seems like a viable method to minimize troop exposure in wide-open lethal zones. But to Ukrainian drone operators, that exact same high-speed movement lights up their monitors. The tactical reality is brutal. A bike screaming across dry terrain kicks up a massive visible plume of dust. That signature instantly alerts reconnaissance drones, whether the rider is crossing an open field, a dirt road, or skirting a tree line. Once their approach path is identified, speed is no longer an asset. In fact, it betrays their main axis of advance. The rider isn't just moving, he is drawing a clear line that Ukrainian operators can track in real time. And this is where the Russian gamble turns fatal. While a motorcycle decreases transit time, it offers absolutely no ballistic protection from above and cannot shield a soldier from a drone striking from the rear or flanks. It simply lacks the capability to shield riders during a highly contested assault. An infantryman might feel swift on wheels, but he remains completely exposed on a battlefield saturated with high-resolution thermal optics. Moscow is trying to claw back maneuver speed, but as we are seeing, the drone war turns speed into a trackable death sentence. That systemic vulnerability is laid bare the moment a rapid motorcycle team hits the open flats and runs directly into a waiting drone ambush. The latest Azov strike demonstrated exactly how vulnerable these motorcycle squads are the second they exit cover and enter the open. This force wasn't moving with the footprint of a heavy armor column. They were attempting to leverage speed, spacing, and agility to bypass the heavy defensive fire that routinely obliterates slower transport vehicles. In theory, that is the core logic of these moto assaults. A dispersed squad can flank defensive lines and storm a weak point before Ukrainian tactical fire control can coordinate a response. But in this engagement, the open terrain was their undoing. Once Ukrainian eyes secured the high ground above that route, those motorcycles ceased to be elusive targets. They became sitting ducks on a clear vector, and that completely shifted the tactical balance of the fight. Azov's FPV drone teams did not need to halt an entire column to break this offensive tactic. Their mission was simple: eliminate the momentum, one rider at a time. Combat footage confirms Russian motorcyclists being hunted and neutralized by high-speed FPV drones while traversing completely exposed, lethal terrain. Let's analyze why. The sole tactical advantage of a motorcycle is its rapid reaction time. If a rider guns the engine before defenders register his presence, he might just survive to reach cover. But once an overhead reconnaissance drone locks onto his vector, and an FPV team lies in wait, that raw speed becomes totally useless. The vulnerability is glaring. A dirt bike offers speed, but leaves the operator with zero ballistic protection. No overhead shielding, no side plates, and absolutely no defense against a lethal payload plunging from the blind spot. The operator must balance, navigate rough terrain, manage speed, and somehow evade incoming fire. That is an impossible cognitive load inside a hot kill zone. Furthermore, these lightweight bikes cannot support the defensive countermeasures standard on armored fighting vehicles. Mobile electronic warfare jamming gear, heavy plating, smoke canisters, and mounted weaponry are impossible to integrate without completely stripping away the speed that made them viable. This Azov operation exposes why FPV drones are so lethal against low-profile targets. Reports detail the brigade executing a search-and-destroy doctrine, deploying agile drones rigged with heavy-shaped charges and anti-personnel fragmentation warheads. This class of ordnance does not require a massive blast radius to neutralize an unarmored rider. It only requires the correct angle of attack. A rear impact directly ignites the fuel tank, engine, or operator. Flanking strikes catch them mid-turn, while a vertical top-down attack exploits the exact vector where the vehicle has zero cover. The moment that drone enters its terminal dive, the soldier's reaction window shrinks to absolute zero. The combat cost-benefit ratio makes this reality even more brutal. Tactical logs confirm at least 6 Russian operators killed and 3 vehicles destroyed, all accomplished using just 8 low-cost FPV drones. That is an incredibly efficient trade for Ukrainian forces, since a drone costs a fraction of specialized military training and tactical momentum lost on the Russian side. This is about far more than the replacement value of the hardware. It is the aborted objective, the dead troops, the compromised route, and the chilling psychological effect on enemy units watching this unfold. That is why this Azov engagement is much more than a viral internet clip. It was a localized skirmish that exposed a systemic vulnerability in Russia's light mobility doctrine. Yes, dirt bikes get assault troops across contested ground quickly, but they also leave them completely naked when we dominate the low-altitude airspace. When drones rule the sky, speed no longer guarantees survival. It simply shortens the path into our kill zones. This brings us directly to a critical tactical question. Let's break down why FPV drones have become the ultimate equalizer for frontline infantry. These assets are vital because they decentralize precision air support, putting force multiplier capabilities directly in the hands of fire teams. Under legacy military doctrine, a small squad spotting an enemy target had to request heavier support assets and wait. That call went up the chain to mortar sections, artillery batteries, or dedicated close air support assets. That latency killed operations. In a dynamic firefight, seconds dictate target escape or elimination. FPVs completely shattered that delay. A forward drone unit positioned near the line of contact can identify a target, launch, and strike before the enemy exits the kill box. These systems are mechanically basic, yet incredibly difficult to defend against. Operating via nose-mounted camera feeds, pilots direct these platforms with a direct, first-person view of the entire engagement zone. These are one-way kinetic interceptors. They track the target, home in, and detonate their explosive payload on impact. Some carry up to 1.5 kilograms of high explosives. While that sounds minor compared to an artillery shell, It is more than enough to neutralize infantry, shred unarmored transport, or disable heavy armor weak spots. The critical factor is terminal control. Indirect mortar fire lands on a fixed grid. Standard artillery rounds follow unyielding ballistic trajectories. But an FPV adapts mid-flight. It maneuvers to pursue evasive vehicles, dives below tree canopies, slips inside ruined structures, or threads the needle through narrow openings conventional fire could never touch. This capability makes them devastatingly effective against highly fleeting pop-up targets. Be it an assault bike, a technical truck, or a fire team, or a fortified bunker, they are all within reach of a fast-acting drone team. This paradigm shift levels the playing field for light infantry. Squads once limited to small arms can now deploy low-cost, precision-guided aerial munitions. The interceptor costs a mere fraction of the enemy assets it obliterates. Plus, the operator remains completely concealed, unlike a dismounted soldier exposing himself to fire an anti-armor missile. On the Ukrainian front lines, battles are rarely decided by single, massive armor assaults. Instead, victory is decided by micro-maneuvers, fleeting engagement windows, and neutralizing the target before it can displace. While analysts point out that FPV drones are cheap and accessible, operating them effectively on the battlefield demands high-level skill. Operators must master wind vectors, payload weight, terrain mask, and the terminal angle. One mistake, and that expensive munition is wasted. Enemy jammer signals can sever the link, and a dying battery instantly cuts your operational range. Adverse weather degrades the optical feed. FPV systems are not magic bullets, they are tactical tools that become lethal only when deployed by specialized units under a coordinated battle plan. This tactical flexibility is exactly what separates these systems from legacy infantry weapons on the zero line. These systems are neither massive nor prohibitively expensive. They do not need to replace heavy artillery to reshape the tactical landscape. Their true lethality lies in delivering precision kinetic strikes directly to the forward edge, the moment an enemy target exposes itself. When you pair this kinetic capability with continuous overhead reconnaissance, the entire sector becomes a death trap for any Russian element attempting to maneuver in the open. These hunter-killer drones peak in lethality not when hunting solo, but when integrated into a persistent surveillance loop feeding real-time target data. This integration is the precise reason Russian high-speed motorcycle assaults are failing so brutally in open sectors. An isolated pilot faces severe constraints, tight battery windows, limited flight times, and a highly restricted field of view. But with a high-altitude observer drone already tracking the objective, the strike asset does not waste precious battery hunting for targets. The target is locked, the vector is calculated, and the enemy's window of survival is already shrinking rapidly. This creates a relentless, highly coordinated tempo of operations. Overhead surveillance assets map every single movement across fields, dirt paths, or contested tree lines. They track the advance long enough to determine if the enemy is probing, rushing, or attempting to bypass defensive lines. Coordinates are instantly fed to the strike team. The FPV is launched only when the target commits to a kill zone with zero cover and no room to retreat. At that point, raw speed is useless. For Russian motorcycle units, this sensor-to-shooter loop is lethal because their signatures are impossible to hide. A dirt bike easily outpaces an infantryman, but it cannot escape physics. On dry roads, it kicks up massive, visible dust plumes. It carves highly visible tracks across open fields, naturally funneling into predictable gaps between minefields and shattered tree lines. From altitude, these visual cues allow Ukrainian drone operators to anticipate the rider's path before the strike asset even takes off. This is why the drone commander's warning from the Kupiansk sector is so critical. Russian forces assume dirt bikes grant high-speed mobility across open fields when summer vegetation and dry soil provide cover. But that dry terrain creates a massive tactical vulnerability, telltale dust clouds rising high behind their wheels. In open sectors, a motorcycle is no longer just transport, it is a giant, moving target marker. Once our drone operators spot it, the enemy's speed advantage completely evaporates. The interceptor drone does not need to hunt blindly across the entire sector. That is the key. Our surveillance assets have already pinpointed the coordinates, trapping the target inside a predefined kill box of movement. The strike FPV only handles the terminal phase, selecting the vector of attack and engaging when evasion is impossible. A sharp turn by a tree line, deceleration over rough terrain, or sheer panic from the first blast provides the decisive opening. This integrated network is why Ukraine's unmanned fleet is far more than a collection of cheap kamikaze drones. It is real-time battlefield interdiction. The surveillance asset secures the target, and the FPV delivers the kinetic hit. Operators link sensor to shooter instantly, neutralizing hostile maneuvers before they can develop into a coordinated assault. Russian forces are no longer just fighting defenders in the trenches. They are racing against the lethal delay between detection and impact. When scout and strike drone elements coordinate, the Russian military loses far more than just infantry and motorcycles. They lose command control over how units approach the line. Their ingress routes become entirely predictable. Cover is temporary, and speed becomes a visible beacon. Once this is established, the question changes. It is no longer about hitting a target, but how this paradigm shift will permanently rewrite modern tactical maneuver and concealment. These unmanned platforms are absolutely reshaping the battlefield, but we cannot treat them as a silver bullet that replaces traditional combined arms. This balance is crucial because viral combat footage often projects a distorted reality. A drone dives directly into a hatch, clears a bunker, or hunts down a rider, making these complex strikes look almost effortless. But combat is rarely that clean. Behind every successful strike clip, there are failed launches, lost signals, botched approaches, brutal weather, depleted batteries, and high-value targets slipping away before the operator can execute the kill. This does not diminish FPV utility. It only sharpens their true tactical value. They are lethal because they force total behavioral adaptation. Troops can no longer mass in the open without drawing fire. Armor cannot advance down roads as if artillery is the only threat. Small units cannot sprint across fields expecting speed to save them. Even dugouts, trenches, and basements and ruined structures offer zero protection. A skilled pilot will hunt down tight gaps legacy weapons could never exploit. Yet, FPV tech faces hard physical constraints. Operators require elite skill, steady hands, and uninterrupted feeds. The bird needs enough battery to strike and adjust. Meanwhile, electronic warfare can sever control links and blind navigation. Rain, heavy fog, gale winds, and smoke completely blind these sensors. One bad angle wastes the payload, and evasive targets survive by breaking contact. That is why FPV is lethal, but also why artillery remains king. A heavy mortar or artillery barrage can suppress entire trench systems, shatter defensive lines, and force the enemy to stay down. FPV excels only when the target is visible and reachable. Artillery dominates when we must saturate grid squares, carpet wider zones, or support large-scale offensive operations. Neither system replaces the other. The winning side is the one coordinating these combat layers with precision. The real takeaway from the Ukrainian theater is not that legacy armor is obsolete. It is that drones have completely revolutionized how we integrate weapons around the squad. Small units now observe deeper, strike faster, and punish enemy maneuvers like full battalions once did. This reshapes command decisions. It forces new camouflage doctrines. It alters vehicle movement. It dictates offensive planning long before troops cross the line of departure. For Russian forces, this exerts unrelenting tactical pressure on the ground. Every bike squad, light buggy, and assault fire team must scan the skies before they even look at the objective ahead. Stall out, and heavy artillery will zero in. Rush across open ground, and UAVs will map their approach corridor. Bunch up, and a single precise strike turns a tactical advance into a catastrophic, filmed failure. While FPV tech hasn't replaced armor or infantry, it now stands as an indispensable layer of frontline fire support. Its primary weapon isn't the physical blast. It's the psychological terror paralyzing every maneuver before the strike even launches. This brings us to the operational reality on this front. Russian units are still desperately probing and launching localized assaults. But Ukrainian defenders are extracting a brutal toll for every single yard. The recent Azov strike on Russian motorcycle assault teams highlights a brutal reality of this theater. Speed may buy you yards across a kill zone, but it cannot protect you from a watchful sky. Russian commanders are deploying dirt bikes because heavy armor is easily spotted, easily mined, and quickly halted on highly mapped choke points. Light bikes reach cover faster, but offer riders absolutely zero ballistic protection from above. Once surveillance UAVs acquire the target, the motorcycle is no longer a clever tactical shortcut. It becomes a moving target trapped in a pre-registered kill zone. This is why FPV strikes are so vital. These assets are not powerful due to their size. They dominate because they deliver precision fire directly to forward units, enabling rapid, devastating counterattacks on exposed targets. Once reconnaissance drones fix the target, the FPV doesn't waste precious time searching. Its only task is to execute the strike at the decisive moment. But let us be clear, modern combat is not a video game. FPV is no silver bullet, and artillery, armor, and infantry remain absolutely fundamental. Their true impact is forcing every unit to fundamentally change how they maneuver, conceal, mass, and assault. If the Kremlin continues using motorcycle probes against defensive lines, Ukrainian forces will keep turning that speed into a fatal liability. The fastest machine on the ground cannot outrun a patient eye in the sky. Subscribe to Military Force for more raw tactical analysis on the weapons, battles, and strategic developments shaping today's battlefields.